This time on Bone Dry Retro, we'll discuss why retro gaming sucks. Number 6, and that is the hardware. Most of these videos are not for people that are really into retro video games or have known about them for a long time. You all know most of this stuff, and you may agree or disagree, and that's part of the fun in all this. But for those that are getting into it, haven't gotten into it, thinking about getting into it, this is my audience, so to speak. And there are just some pitfalls that I'd like to point out. And some of these seem obvious, some of them don't. There are people that fall in the line of purism, and there are people that don't. So, for instance, one of the hardware issues is if you're going to play an NES, a Nintendo Entertainment System that came out in 1985, to be a purist, you can't play that on a modern TV. Now, it's very difficult to play it on a modern TV to begin with. There are workarounds and ways to do it, but by doing so, you're altering the signal and the output. Therefore, you're not playing the true version of the game. So some people give you a hard time with that. So a lot of my complaints about why retro gaming sucks focus on being a purist and wanting to maybe recapture what it was like to play a certain game way back in the day. And that's pretty much what I'm getting at. So to play an NES on a flat screen TV requires either a ton of workarounds or just a loss in graphics. When you're taking these bigger pixels and you're blowing them up now, it's not going to look the same. It wasn't designed to be played on these TVs. So in order to really play it right, you need to play it on a CRT. And a CRT is not that readily available. So the hardware, the old hardware is a problem, and the new hardware is a problem. And then the solution of these two can be a problem. So when I say hardware, it's an all-encompassing thing, but the main one is you can't just go down to a retro game store or go to a garage sale or something like that, pick up an old console, take it home and play it. So there's a barrier of entry there, so to speak, and the hardware is that barrier. It starts with the old technology, with outputs that just do not work with a lot of modern TVs. Some it will, some it won't. I bought a new TCL 4K TV, and I cannot hook up my old consoles to it automatically. I've got to do a lot of workarounds for that. I don't mind not having the purism sometimes. That's just my personal feeling. Others do. So now you either have to get adapters that sometimes work, sometimes don't. Sometimes you need more than one, or you need to get that CRT TV. And that'll point to another issue, which will be in another episode, and that is space. The CRT TVs take up a lot of space. I mean, literally, they are as wide as they are high, as they are deep. They're like cubes. So if you get a 40-inch diagonal TV, you're talking about a good 2.5 feet, possibly 2.5 by 2.5 by 2.5, give or take some inches and feet there, as I'm just doing that off the top of my head. But that's a lot. And the weight, and then a stand to put it on. You know, the stands for our TVs now are, they expect a light TV. They're not expecting an 80-pound TV or a 90-pound TV. So these are issues. Now, of course, you can skirt that by getting a much smaller one. So that's one thing with the hardware. The other thing is the hardware goes bad often. Even if someone sells you something that's in good shape, it will go bad. The controllers, often the buttons will go bad. So you take that thing home, it may or may not work. I bought a 360S recently on Facebook Marketplace, and it was in good shape, obviously well taken care of, and yet the controller button stuck. Another time, I bought another console, and the input, the AV input, something inside there was just a little bit off. Now I'm good at diagnosing this stuff, and even I struggled with that. So it's something you have to be prepared for. You're gonna have to be a tweaker and a fixer and everything like that. The hardware is going to give you trouble constantly. So it's something to consider. It's what makes retro gaming suck. And another big part of the hardware is, yeah, you might have fond memories of playing on the NES controller, that little thing. When you get older, and after you've experienced all these other controllers and these ergonomic things, playing this way, it's not the same. I'm sorry, it's not the same. And you're going to feel the difference. And it's going to destroy the nostalgia for some people. So the PlayStation 3 is technically today in 2023 a retro console. The 360 is a retro console. So if you go back to that, things are very similar. You go back a little before that, even to the original Xbox. So if you go back, Nintendo 64, SNES, and say almost all of Sega consoles, the hardware is vastly different than what we're used to now on so many different levels. And it's something that you just need to consider. I mean, memory cards is not something that most people have on their minds when they're playing games today. So to know to manage those memory cards, to play a Dreamcast, for instance, which had a great option, you could put many different peripherals inside the controller itself. And most of the ones I have from the past don't work. And they require a bunch of cracking open, changing batteries, or adjusting things to get them to work. So the hardware is old, and old things are going to give you problems. It's not like even my 3DO, which I've had since I bought it brand new in 1993, and it has been treated as the expensive piece of hardware that it is, it still doesn't work right and needs to be fixed. And buy one that looks brand new, and when you bring it home, there's a good chance it might work when you first bring it home, but a week, a month, maybe two afterwards, you might have some issues, especially if it's something that sat for a while. So that's where the frustration comes in, and these expectations, this love that we have for these games and this desire to play these games, or if you're younger, the desire for the simplicity. Well, let me just temper that a little bit. This simplicity joke, not so simple, yet the games look simple, and maybe graphically they're simple, and maybe in some ways the gameplay is a little bit simple, but playing these games is anything but simple, both back then and today. And the back then part was saving is so much different. There is no saving sometimes. We had instincts back then that were developed, which was do not turn off that console. I'm in the middle of a Contra run and I had to go to work, or I had to deliver my newspapers, let's say more correctly. Don't touch it. And if you came home and your little sister was about to hit that thing, you dove to protect it. Those were instincts that were created from trauma of losing those games. Somebody today doesn't have those instincts. So you're going to go through that process. Do you want to, is the question. Do you want to condition yourself that way? So they were difficult that way. Even passcodes or passwords, they were intricate and long and annoying. So that was a problem. And the idea of playing those games, to us, they weren't simple. They were complicated. And that's the thing. They were complicated for us. It's all about perspective. So maybe people will say they're simple, but they weren't designed to be simple. And today they're difficult because of what I've said before about setting them up and all the things that you have to do in order to get the game to play. And there's been times where I'm in the mood for a good retro game session and I go to set it up and I know what I'm doing, and it still takes me almost twice as long to do as how long I want to play. Like I might just do a 15-minute run, but it takes me a half an hour to get everything set up. When I get a game room set up, that'll be less of an issue. And that'll be another one, like I said, another episode is going to be space, because you need a ton of it, not just for the equipment, but for the games and everything else that goes with it. And it's something to consider. So I love retro games. I hope that these titles don't make people think that I don't, but I think that it's really important to point out what sucks about them, because this keeps me up at night. I want to play some of these games. I want to play my Intellivision games back there. I want to play that Microvision back there, but the hardware was not designed to last this long, and it's got at best glitches, and at worst can't work. So be ready to be friggin' frustrated on a daily basis if you're going to try and play these retro games.